So welcome everyone. I am Rita Burke, President of Southern California Women in Homeland Security. It's a pleasure seeing all of you since our last event in December, our holiday party. It seems so long ago. We see a lot. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all the new faces. For those of you who are new, a little bit about our organization. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan, all-inclusive organization. Our mission is to network, to learn, and to give back. We have members from a diverse spectrum of organizations, including public health, law enforcement, fire services, emergency management, only to name a few. We also wanted to highlight the many opportunities we have to volunteer and to get involved if you want to learn more. If you're interested, if you have any questions, please email the address you see here on the slide to learn ways that you can get more involved. We're always looking for positive, energetic folks who are full of great ideas. As part of our Giving Back campaign, this session, we are supporting DIY Girls. Their mission is to increase girls' interest in success in technology and engineering. They're based out of San Fernando Valley. So please go to their website, see how you can best support them. They're always looking for speakers who can speak about science and engineering. And so what better group than Women in Homeland Security? We certainly felt the love from our sponsors this time. So a huge thank you to our platinum sponsor, Black Knight Patrol. They are based out of San Pedro. They are a full service private security company serving clients across Southern California. And we are hugely, hugely grateful for their support. Our next sponsor is IEM. They are the world's largest woman-led disaster and crisis management firm. And our secretary, Brandy Welch, happens to be a part of that wonderful organization. So thank you to IEM for their support. And at our silver sponsor level, we have COPE, Community Outreach Promoting Emergency Preparedness, and Be More Prepared. They have been a staunch supporter of ours since the very, very beginning, and we could not be more grateful to them. They are a nonprofit volunteer emergency preparedness organization. And also UCAN H2O. They are a distributor of emergency water with over 50-year shelf life. And Adaptable Connectivity, the emergency satellite company. So we are hugely grateful and indebted to all of our sponsors who help make these events possible. So please, if you have a moment, go help support them, go on their website, see if it's something that your organizations can use. But we're always looking for additional sponsors. So please, help support our organization. And certainly last but not least, NPS. This event would not have been possible without them because they're the ones who put us in charge with our esteemed speaker. They are a graduate university out of Monterey, California, offering master's and doctoral degrees in more than 70 fields of study to the U.S. Armed Forces, DoD civilians, and international partners. A great resource, so please check them out. And we thank Nibble for, I don't know if all of you have ordered your meals. I have mine here. I can't wait to dig into it. It looks delicious. I will tell you the cookie had no chance. It did not make it to today, but they very graciously worked with us to get the meals delivered to all of you who ordered. So huge thank you to them as well. So without further ado, I am super excited to present our speaker for today, Chief Cathy Lanier, who's the Senior Vice President, Chief of Security Officer for the National Football League. So a couple of logistics and then let us begin. I'm going to put the spotlight if I can, so everyone can see you clearly. So welcome, Chief Lanier. We're so excited to have you. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for having me. Excellent. Impressive list of sponsors there.
I know, you really bring in the money. Let me tell you, this was unprecedented, and we had a record-breaking number of attendees. This is the first time that we were worried that our Zoom wouldn't be able to handle everyone. So this was a good problem to have.
That is great to hear. I'm going to call my mother and tell her immediately.
You should. You should. So I guess congratulations is in order. You're off of yet another successful football Super Bowl event. So can you tell us a little bit about what does security for an event of that magnitude look like?
Oh my gosh. You know, from most of you see from my background, I come from, 27 years in law enforcement and in Washington, D.C., where, I served as a special operations commander for many, many years. I was the lead planner for 2 presidential inaugurations. I was the chief of police for 2 additional presidential inaugurations, to include Obama's first, which was over 2 million people, the largest gathering ever in the city. So I thought when I got this job that Super Bowl would be a walk in the park. It's not a walk in the park. It is really not. I mean, the thing with the inauguration is it's 3 or 4 days, 2 or 3 days usually, and maybe a 4th day, some inaugural balls, the parade, the swearing in. The Super Bowl is literally, it is 10 days of events, usually over, we had less venues this year than normal, but usually over 10 to 12 different venues. So it's all spread out all around the city and surrounding the city. It really, the crowds that each one of those venues bring is a challenge in itself. But just the level of security that we put around the Super Bowl is, I would say, equal to the level of security that we put around the president. So it is literally, it is an exhaustive set of security around multiple venues that go on for 10 days. It just seems like it's never going to end. But we, this year to add to it, even though we had less venues, we did still have good crowds. We hit record crowds every day for our NFL Experience, which is an outdoor free event for locals to come and enjoy along the river there in Tampa. And we had 25,000 in the stadium. This is the largest crowd we've had all year in the stadium. So it was a great event. And then we had that layer on top that health and safety is another responsibility that falls to security mostly. So we had to make sure that people we had the proper protocols for COVID-19 for safety and security. And then we had to, kind of do compliance around that, not just with fans and make sure they were wearing their mask and social distancing, but also with all of the working staff and vendors and, construction. And it was just really, I am so glad it's over.
Well, congrats again.
Thank you.
Now, NFL is a very male-dominated space. What is that like for you?
I've worked in a male-dominated space so long. When I left the police department, I started policing in 1990, and it was very, very male-dominated back then. And it's gotten so much better over the years, but I guess I've been in the environment so long, I really just don't think about it. The hardest thing with the NFL is really, knowing the business, knowing the football, learning the football. But really, I don't think about being in a male-dominated field. Maybe I just have done it so long, it doesn't faze me.
Something you mentioned, learning about the football. So did you always kind of want to work for the NFL? Are you a huge fan, or how did that all fall into place?
Between us friends? Between us friends? No, I mean, I never had thought about it. I got a letter from the NFL when they were looking to hire a new chief security officer, inviting me to participate. I kind of laughed it off initially because I was in the chief's job, and I remember showing it to a couple of my male deputy, assistant chiefs, and kind of going, "Oh, wouldn't you love to have this offer?" And of course they're all like, "Oh, dream job." But I really didn't think about it. And the only reason I actually went through the interview process is because one of my assistant chief, who later took the job as the chief there, Pete Newsham, says to me, he says, "Hey, chief, when was the last time you had a job interview?" And I was like, 27 years ago. He goes, it's not as easy as you might think. You might want to just go through the process to get some practice and see what it's like. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. And then I did 16 interviews, 16 different interviews in the NFL up in New York, and finally got the job offer.
And now here you are.
And now here I am.
Do you have a most memorable event that took place?
I have to tell you, I think this year, the thing that really struck me, and it struck me pretty significantly is that as we were halfway through game day, and I walked around and looked at what we were doing and just kind of took in that whole season, what we were able to do, 269 games, and get where we were, given all the challenges that all the other sports leagues have had. We literally, throughout the course of the year, movie theaters, restaurants, entertainment venues, there's no mass gatherings, concerts, everything had been shut down. There was no real, hospitality was hit hard, travel and retail were hit hard. And here we were doing all those things. We did it all year long. We took a product and we moved it around the country, our players, our game. We traveled across the country all year long with unprecedented restrictions on travel. We had a mass gathering event at 19 of our stadiums. We brought in over 1.1 million fans during the course of the season to our games in 19 different stadiums. We had food and beverage. We entertained. We had a concert at the Super Bowl, multiple concerts at the Super Bowl. We were able to do everything that the country wasn't able to do all year long because of these restrictions, and provide just a little bit of close to normalcy for people with the NFL. And it struck me in the middle of this game day just how awesome that effort was, and how much it meant to me and to the people who were able to enjoy some of that.
Absolutely. That is a huge accomplishment in and of itself, to bring back some normalcy to people's lives.
Yeah,
absolutely. There's definitely been some escape. Now, yes, you were head of security now at the NFL, but you did not have an easy road getting there. And so I was hoping you could share a little bit about your story growing up and kind of your perseverance. And really, you're the epitome of never giving up.
Well, I had a non-traditional start for sure. So let me see. My personal life really was, my mom married her childhood sweetheart right out of high school. So in 1958, she married my dad, who was a firefighter. She was a secretary, went straight to work in the federal government. Kind of classic, late 50s, early 60s family. I'm the youngest of three. I have two older brothers, and the only girl, which was the benefit. And when I was 2 years old, my mom took us to the beach for the weekend, and when we came back, my dad was gone. He had moved out and left my mom with three kids. She had taken a leave of absence from work after I was born, just because they couldn't afford childcare for three kids on their salaries when they're both working. So he left her with three kids and no money. So we, next 10 years of my life, we really struggled. We lived on welfare. My mom and my grandmother really, the women, of course, really pulled it together. It was a great childhood, don't get me wrong. My mother was always there. She took me to major ed practice and to soccer practice and helped me with my homework. And it was just great as far as I was concerned. But then when I was transitioning from elementary school to junior high school,
Yes.
13 years old, we were being bused into a new area, a different neighborhood.
Come in.
And going to,
Come in.
Junior high school myself. My mom went back to work because I was the youngest of three kids. So now we could be latchkey kids, but that was a crucial time in my life. So I'm becoming this teenager and now being bused into these new schools and just losing my mother, that guardian, that best friend at that time in my life. So that's when things really started to change for me. Initially when we were being bused into this new school, every day when our bus pulled up, we would get jumped by the neighborhood kids. That's of course until we learned how to jump them first when we got off the bus. That made it a little bit different advantage. Anybody that knows the Washington, D.C. area knows everything's about neighborhoods. So I started to skip the first period of school because I didn't want to have that experience of getting off the bus and fighting every day. And then I started skipping other classes. And before I know it, by the end of the 8th grade, I had gone from being a straight A student in the talented and gifted program to failing all of my classes for lack of attendance. And then, from there, nothing's good about truancy, right? Nothing good happens when you're not in school and you should be in school. So I started running with the wrong crowds, hanging out with older people. And by the time I finished the 9th grade, at 14 years old, I had run away from home. I was pregnant and I married my much older boyfriend and had my son. So, I got married the day after my 15th birthday and I was 8 months pregnant. So that's the non-traditional start for me. I was 16 years old And by the time I, got out of the marriage, and 16 years old with a 9th grade education. So.
Wow. Now, so clearly we know you went back to school. So what were the motivating factors that really prompted you to return to school and to move up in your career?
Well, the motivating factor, well, first of all, my mother really did a good job and laid a good foundation in raising her kids. I mean, I might have lost my mind temporarily when I was a teenager, but she had built a good foundation. And then secondly, my motivation, once my son was born, everything was about him. I didn't want him to be in the same crappy neighborhood we were in. I didn't want him going to the same crappy schools I went to. I wanted him to have an opportunity to go to college. No one in my family had ever been to college. And I knew I couldn't do that without an education. So I went back to school and I got a GED. My mom helped me. She would drive me to my GED classes, and I got my GED and then started taking classes at the local community college. I was taking one class a semester. That's all I could afford because I was went to work as a secretary when I was 16, and then I waitressed at night. And I figured that community college would take me 25 years to get my degree at one class a semester, but I was going to do it so I could provide a better opportunity for my son. So that's really what motivated everything from that point on.
And then how did you enter the world of policing?
Funny story. I do come from a law enforcement family, or a public safety family. My father was a firefighter. My oldest brother is a firefighter. My other brother was a police officer. But I was working as a secretary and a waitress. And I saw an ad in the paper when I was 22 years old, the Washington Post, that said that they were going to hire 1,000 cops, and they were given a test on Saturday, and they had tuition reimbursement. So they would actually pay for me to go to school, and I could take more than one class a semester. So I went and stood in line with 1,000 other people that got in to take the test that day. And I did well on the test, and I got hired. So at 23 years old, I started, walking a footbeat in Washington, D.C., 1990, and started taking classes. I volunteered to work permanent evenings. I was in court a lot during the day. And then on my days off, I went to school.
So we know that you really moved up and you had a very successful career, which kind of culminated in the start in 2007 when you became the chief of police there. You're probably one of the most loved and respected chief of police there. You are attributed to 20% crime reduction in your area. What do you think? How did you achieve that?
I'll say this probably more than once in this session, this interview, is, women have a lot to offer in professions that are traditionally male dominated. And I think that, one, I came up through the ranks. So of course, when you come up through the ranks, you see all the things that you wish you could fix if you ever were the boss. So I had that list of things that I wanted to fix. But I think for law enforcement, women are really good communicators, which is something that was really lacking in policing at the time. So getting out into the community, making connections with people, making sure we did a better job of communicating with people in our communities. I created multiple different ways for us to connect with the kids, with the teenagers, with the kids in school, with the people in the projects in the neighborhoods, and through listservs. So I just worked really, really hard to earn the trust of the community and show them that, look, we do care when homicides happen in your neighborhood. Doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in, every homicide matters. And we're going to do everything we can to close those homicides, and we're going to prevent homicides. I just try to change the way people thought about what policing was. I kind of did away with all that zero tolerance hotspot policing, which was very effective in New York, but it wasn't really effective in our neighborhoods. It was really alienating people from having a connection with the police. And if we don't have connections with police, with the community, we can't prevent crime. I always tell people, when you do zero tolerance hotspots policing, and you're locking up all these largely law-abiding citizens for these nuisance, small, driving, license expired, whatever, you're impacting the people in the neighborhoods that have the highest crime rate. So these are the largest number of victims and witnesses that we're impacting here. So, by the time we go and lock up all of these law-abiding citizens, largely law-abiding citizens, we've alienated the people that are the highest percentage of the victims out there, and the people that have information that they could give us to help us prevent some of these crimes by taking those high-risk offenders off the street. So I think it's just a matter of using the skills that I learned over the years and trying to add a little bit of compassion and empathy to what we do.
And I'm glad that you really highlighted that women have a lot to offer to generally male-dominated fields. That's so true.
Yeah.
Whatever possessed you to go for the chief of police role? Because that is quite a job and quite a high profile, and a lot of politics involved. And so someone who's kind of a straight shooter, just doesn't want to deal with politics. So what motivated you to take on that role?
It's so funny you asked it that way. That's perfect. So I never wanted to be the chief, never even had a thought in my head. I tell you, I took every promotional exam that came along because I just wanted to make more money, right? I wanted to make more money. So I took sergeant's exam at 3 years, and then lieutenant, then captain. So I took every civil service exam and I took every promotion test because I needed to make the money I want to eventually put my son in private school, which I did. So I took promotional exams so that I could make more money, but I never thought I thought if I make it to the rank of commander before I retire, that's awesome. I'd be so happy. Never even had an image in my head of what it would be like to have a female police chief in Washington, D.C. Never thought of it. And in fact, when the incoming mayor at the time, Mayor Fenty, offered me the job, I was a commander, so he made the offer to me over several assistant chiefs that were higher ranked than I was. I turned it down. I said, look, I got 16 years in a civil service and I want my retirement. I had to do 25 years and be 50 to retire. At the time he offered me the job, I had 16 years on, I was 39. So it'd be crazy for me to take that job. I don't want the job. I don't like politics. There's a working woman segment out there that people play all the time now. When I was interviewed as a commander and I'm like, oh, I don't want to be I don't do politics. I just do my policing thing, right? I hate politics. But he was persistent and he kept coming back and saying, look, what if I can secure your retirement? And would you take the job if I secured your retirement? And then my mom gave me the best advice in the world, as she normally did. She says, look, if you don't take this job, you never know what asshole you might be working for. So, I'm sorry. Tell me to family language rules. Hopefully the FCC is not monitoring. But so I took the mayor at the time. Actually, there's in the DC code in the District of Columbia, there is the Cathy Lanier Retirement Act. They changed the law to secure my retirement so that I could take the job. I thought I'd only be there 4 years. We never had a chief that had crossed from one mayor to the next. So I thought, well, as long as I get my retirement, then I'm good. And then I ended up staying in there 10 years. So it really didn't matter anyway. I worked the same amount of time I would have had to work all along.
So you even impacted policy. You caused policy changes, which is incredible.
Yeah, indirectly I did.
You did. So I know you mentioned you kind of kept moving up because you wanted to make more money, which I can completely relate. But I wonder, there's probably more to it than just why you continue to be drawn to these leadership roles.
I loved policing. I mean, when I was going back to school, while I was taking these promotional exams and moving my way up through the ranks, I just loved policing. The day I walked out of the academy, I knew that this is something that I loved. I had a passion for. I loved interacting with people in the community. I stayed in patrol the first part of my 10 years of my career because I just loved that adrenaline, that 911 response time, being right there, first one on the scene and interacting with people and helping people. And but I just had a real passion for what I did. And so when I was going to school, I took my bachelor's and a master's degree in management at Johns Hopkins because I was taking promotional exams and I was moving up the ranks. I needed to be a good manager. So I went to school. And I studied management instead of criminal justice. I knew the criminal justice. And then as I moved up through the ranks and got in different roles when I took over Special Operations Division, and I had, post 9/11, right after 9/11, and I had bomb units and SWAT teams and the Homeland Security Counterterrorism Mission. I had an opportunity to go to the Naval Postgraduate School and get a second master's degree in Homeland Security and Defense. And so I thought, I had such a passion for what I did. It never felt like a day of work in my life. It really, I tell people in 27 years, I never felt like I was working. So I think it's really just that passion that drove me to keep trying to do everything I can to contribute to the profession that I picked.
So you're absolutely right. Was it find what you love to do and you never have to work a day in your life?
Yep.
So it sounds like, having, the example of what prompted you besides good advice from your mom, but having that advocate who's like, the mayor, you had to just try it out. What else would you say really helped you most in your career?
I have to tell you, my in my personal life, it was always my family, my mother, my son. There was always something driving me. Providing a better life for my son drove me to take promotional exams, drove me to go back to school, and it was a purpose. It was a reason that I did things that I did. So family always was that thing that got me where I needed to go in my personal life, but also in my professional life. But there was also somehow all along the way, there was always somebody that would, when I didn't have the confidence to do something myself or didn't think I could do something myself, that would push me. So good mentors. There was always people coming up through the ranks in my career that would push me to do things that I didn't really have the confidence to do. I would have never put in for the commander of the Special Operations Division. They'd never had a woman there before. It was a very complicated job. You had to manage all the demonstrations and protests and permits and civil disturbance and SWAT teams. And I would have never put in for that. And the chief at the time, Chuck Ramsey, he's asked me if I'd take the job. He's like, well, do you want to go to SOD? And I'm like, oh, that's nice. Thanks, boss. That's great. I love it. But I really like patrol. I'm good at patrol. And I knew that I was comfortable. I knew patrol really well as a district commander. And he came back to me about a week later and he says, I'm not really asking you. I'm kind of telling you you're going to SOD. And I confided in him. I said, look, I don't know if I'm comfortable. And he goes, well, we get comfortable, right? You learn the job, you get comfortable. Don't ever pass up, an opportunity because you're comfortable. And so I always had people like that pushing me to do things. And I think that made a huge difference.
And I'm really happy that you mentioned the mentorship piece of it. So we have quite a few folks on here today who are kind of just starting out in their field in emergency management and security. How do they go about finding a mentor or, establishing that relationship with a mentor?
You know what I did? I just looked at people I would watch in my environment. Of course, in policing back in those days, there was a lot of people you didn't want to be like. You didn't want to work for them. You didn't want to be like them. But there were always people that I had thought, wow, how impressive. Here's this, leader who never loses his cool, and he thinks well on his feet, and he's very personable. And so I would look at people like that, and then I would just try and study them and find opportunities and say, hey, do you mind if I went and watched you testify at council hearing? I used to watch Chuck Ramsey testify at council hearings all the time. It's like watching paint dry to most people, but I learned, how he dealt with some of those tough, difficult situations. And so that's why I kind of sought mentors out that way, the people that I was impressed with by the way they did things. And most of those people are impressive for a reason, and they don't mind helping you. So I just tried to learn from those people. And if they would be willing to I never said, hey, would you be my mentor? But they were my mentors.
Now, looking back at your career, is there anything that you would have done differently where you kind of think back like, oh, I wish I didn't do that. I took a different route.
I wish no, I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't do anything differently. I wouldn't have taken I don't wish I'd taken a different route. I jumped around. Once I started getting promoted, I got new jobs every 2 years. They put you in a new patrol district when you're in patrol. And then after that, every 2 or 3 years, you went to a whole new skill. I think I spent the longest time. I went narcotics, vehicular homicide, SOD. I mean, as long as I stayed in anything after patrol was 5 years in SOD. But I think that was good. Having that diversity of background was great. So I wouldn't do anything differently in terms of my career path. I wish if I could do anything differently, that would have made my career path, maybe my career even better, but certainly more enjoyable, is to have had more confidence in myself all along. I agonized over everything, oh, I'll never be able to do this. This is not, I'm not, I can't do this job, or I'm not going to be good at it, or I'm going to fail and then, let people down. And I wish I had just stopped it, just had the confidence and just did it, it would have made my life a little more pleasant.
I think we can all, sometimes we are our worst critics in our own heads.
Especially women.
So that kind of segues into my next question. What is the biggest piece of advice that you would give to, kind of more senior women, but also those in particular who are up and coming?
Biggest piece of advice. I'd say there's two kind of things that I keep in my mind all the time. That that helped to motivate me. So I say advice wise, I would say never pass up opportunities because you're comfortable. You know, I had jobs that I loved. I mean, I loved my job as a sergeant. I loved my job as a lieutenant. But when it was time for a promotional exam, staying where I was comfortable versus going and doing something different. I see a lot of people pass up opportunities because they're comfortable where they are. That's a mistake. Had I done that, I would have never been the chief. I certainly wouldn't never have accomplished the things I've accomplished. And ultimately the end game is, you know, make enough money to take care of your family and have a nice retirement. And so, you know, here we are. I think in terms of other advice, but kind of personal for me, for people from the very beginning, you know, I've always been the kind of person that believes like never make excuses, no excuses ever for anything. If you make a mistake, you make a mistake, but don't make excuses. If you do something wrong, I mean, I'm of the philosophy, if I make a mistake and I do something wrong, I'm going to be the one that tells my boss. Somebody else is not going to tell my boss. You know, I'm going to go in there and get that out of the way right away. And, you know, it's a mistake. I don't make excuses for like, well, it wouldn't have happened if this wasn't, you know, or if so-and-so didn't do that, you know, so I don't believe in making excuses for anything. And I think if you have that philosophy, then you're much more likely to continue to push yourself and go farther. And then the other one comes from my grandmother, who was a very wise woman who said, you know, you're going to be damned if you do and damned if you don't. You better be damned for doing. And certainly in our line of work, you got to be damned for doing, because lack of action is not an option. So those are the, you know, few little pieces of advice that have served me really well.
These are excellent pieces of advice. And you talk about your mother and your son and your grandmother, and so family is clearly super important to you. How do you find that kind of, I don't want to say perfect because there's no such thing, but just that right stripe of balance between family and other competing responsibilities?
Well, it's varied throughout the course of my life. You know, I had to make some tough choices when my son was born, right? I mean, I'm 16 years old. I'm trying to go back to school and get a degree. My grandmother and my mother, you know, my mother had gone back to work, so she worked as a secretary 30 years. My grandmother retired from the federal government and helped take care of my son. But I was going to school and working 2 jobs, and I didn't spend as much time with my son as I'd like to when he was younger, because I was kind of driving for his future. And it was a sacrifice that was a tough one. But now that my son's an adult, thank God, he understands. It was a little tougher on him when he was younger. Right, you know, my working 2 jobs and going to school and being around so little that I was. You know, we all lived in the same house together, but when I came home at night, he was in bed, obviously. So some of those choices you don't have, and you have to make those tough decisions. But otherwise, you know, my family is everything to me. You know, I went from caring for my son from very young, and now I take care of my mother. She became disabled more than 10 years ago, and I take care of her. She's my life. I mean, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. So, you know, that's just what motivates me. I try, and when I had to go spend 2 weeks in London, and I know that once a week I have to be with my mother. She won't let anybody shower her but me. So, you know, I've got to be here to shower her. So when I had to go, we had back-to-back games in London. I flew over to London. I worked the first game. I flew home for a day, took care of my mother, and I flew back to London, which was brutal. Trust me, it was brutal. But not taking care of my family is not an option for me. So, I mean, again, sometimes you got to make some real sacrifices. And I work a lot of hours, and then I have a boyfriend who I love very much. And we spend as much time together as we possibly can. And, you know, we go and do things and ride bikes and kayak, and, you know, got to know what's important in life, and family is one of them.
Absolutely. And they are all very lucky to have you, from what it sounds like. We're coming up on, I got about 5 more minutes with our conversation with Chief Lanier, and then we'll open it up to questions. And I see the questions coming into our chat, and they're all wonderful questions, so we can't wait. Just got a few more questions with you. You mentioned how to your role in the police, you brought in the communication piece and really valuing community. How have you brought kind of those traits also to the NFL, do you think?
Oh, you know, I jokingly tell people when I got to the NFL, I thought, oh, I'm going to go to the private sector. They got it all figured out. It's going to be so much better than government, right? I feel like I step back in time 25 years sometimes. You know, it's all relative. You know, I think for me going into the NFL, it really kind of was like that. It felt very stovepipey, and, you know, people just didn't really communicate well. And so I've really pushed hard to make sure that, in my opinion, security has to be involved in every element of the business. We should be protecting the brand reputation. We should be making sure that we're not partnering with, any partners that we haven't done extreme due diligence on to make sure that they can't harm our reputation or our brand. So I really had to kind of push my way into rooms, and it took me quite a while, but we are now in a place where I think people consult with security or come to security and ask for our support on a lot of things. We finally have got our seat at the table, but it really was just a matter about forcing people to. And I'm just one of those people that if I really believe that you need to talk to me, I'm just going to be right there in your face and be friendly and just, you're going to talk to me. So that's kind of the way we work it.
Sometimes that's the only way to do it.
Right.
Excellent. Well, now we have 2 questions for you that we ask all of our participants. So the first is, why are organizations like Women in Homeland Security so important in your opinion?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that women offer skills that are unique to women, and that is always been looked at as a disadvantage, and it's an advantage. It's an advantage for us in these emergency jobs, emergency preparedness, Homeland Security jobs, because we are really good communicators. We are great multitaskers, right? How many guys do you know that can, I'm sorry, there's guys, I know there's guys on here, and I don't mean to be disparaging, but women are great multitaskers, and it's just evolution. It's the way we evolved, right? We have to do multiple things at one time, and we're really good at that. And in fact, we thrive on that. So good communicators, good multitaskers, and we bring a level of compassion and empathy to the things that we do. I mean, those are the strengths that women need to use in these jobs, because that's what's missing from some of these jobs. And in particular, we're the caregivers. You hear me talking about taking care of my son, taking care of my mom, we're the caregivers, but these are jobs where caring for the people that you are protecting is really, really important. And I think women should just look at those strengths and use them to their advantage and not their disadvantage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the last question is, you have a very stressful job. How do you kind of unwind and relax when you're not at work?
It would be bad if I said wine, wouldn't it?
That's what
this is California, right?
Yeah. There's no judgment here. Trust me, no judgment whatsoever.
It wasn't always this way. I mean, there's been periods in my life when I was, a workaholic way too far over the line and didn't ever de-stress. And it really took a toll, on my health. When I left the police department after 10 years in the chief's job, I remember telling people, like 2 months after I was gone, I looked in the mirror one day and I thought, who are you? I mean, I just looked so different after 2 months away from that 24/7 nonstop stress. I mean, and a different stress, because in law enforcement, people are dying, right? You're looking at the mother of children that are killed, and you just, officers that are injured or killed in the line of duty. I mean, that's real chronic, long time stress. It's really hard on you. So I make it a point now to make sure that when I have my days off, and I try and get 2 every week, I don't always, but when I have my days off, I'm going to play hard. I'm going to bike ride. I'm going to kayak. I even, during this pandemic, when I was locked down, I bought a sewing machine and taught myself how to sew so I can make my own cushions for the, the porch out here, whatever. I'm going to do something other than work 24/7 all the time now. And that's the balance you got to try and strike.
Thank you so much, Chief Lanier. We're now going to open it up to questions from our audience. Thank you for those of you who put your questions into the chat. As I call your name, if you don't mind unmuting yourself, please introduce yourself to Chief Lanier, who you are and where you're from, and please ask your question. So let's begin. Casey Treadway, you are up first.
Hi, yes, my name is Casey Treadway. I am an emergency services specialist here in the Bay Area. And my question for you is, how did you grow into that leadership role when moving up the rank, and what challenges did you overcome when doing so?
I tell you, I did it for the wrong reasons, but it's the right thing to do. And that is when you take on new, more responsibilities or leadership roles. I was always so afraid that I'd be judged as a woman. So I studied really, really hard for my promotional exams. And I always say I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I can outwork anybody. And I would study 2 hours a day, every single day, no matter what. I committed myself, look, I'm not going to embarrass myself and take this test and look stupid and not do well. So I committed to that. I studied harder than everybody else, and I always did well on those tests. Some of these guys, it was nothing to them. They didn't have to study hardly at all, and they could whiz right through them. So I kept that same philosophy when I moved into new roles, is you've got to know your business. Your confidence is going to come from you knowing the answers to the questions that people are going to ask you, you knowing how to do what it is that job that you just took. So it takes a lot of time, a lot of personal commitment. I mean, all the way up to the day I left the chief's job. And I would read about 2 hours every night. I would make sure that I had just basic information that I needed to know, statistics about the police department. What's my, fleet mobility right now? I mean, every morning when I walked out my front door, there was a possibility that a reporter could stick a mic in my face and say, hey, we understand that 30% of your fleet's down and out of service. Why is that? Well, if I don't have an answer, I look like an idiot, right? And I don't look like a good leader. So I did my homework, and I made sure that I read incessantly. When I took over SOD, I not only did I buy books to read about hostage negotiations and SWAT team evolution, and but I also got the manuals that the bomb squad had for, I didn't need to be a bomb technician, but I needed to know what my bomb squad did and how they were trained and what they thought. So I did my homework, and that gives you confidence, because then you don't fail. But it takes commitment. And so anytime you're moving into a new job, especially when you're a leader, people are going to look at you to be right, and you got to be right. And that takes a lot of work.
That's a great question and a great answer. Thank you, Casey. Our next question comes from Vivian. I hope there's only one Vivian in our virtual room. So please introduce yourself and tell us where you're from.
Hi there. Thank you so much. My name is, excuse me, my name is Vivian Gerlach. I'm actually in Sacramento, but I went to USC, so I have a Southern California connection. And I'm currently a research director for a small state agency. And my question, you actually kind of partially answered this on the last question, was for people who are looking to maybe transition mid-career or late career into security fields, various security fields, kind of where would they start? What would be a really good, kind of a place to go? And answer that a bit with, learning and diving in. But I was wondering if you had any other kind of wise words. And also, I love the advice from your mom. It's fantastic. That makes me really happy. Thank you.
Being the one with the bad word in it?
Absolutely. Thank you.
So I'm looking at your question in chat, like your example is going from research to like cybersecurity. Well, let me tell you something. It takes guts, but it is, to some of your point earlier, it is about how much effort do you want to put into this, and you can do anything you put the effort into. I don't care what your career change choice is, as long as you do your homework, you can do it. I mean, so funny you mentioned that, because when I came to the NFL, and it was a very hard transition for me. One of the questions that I asked me, like, what happened in your career? What's the most discouraging thing that's happened to you in your career? And between us friends, one of the most discouraging things that happened to me was when I transitioned to the NFL. It seemed like it took me forever to feel like I fit in there, like that this was the right choice, the right thing for me to do. I knew my business, security, but I didn't know theirs. And it was really hard for me to learn it. And I struggled, and it was like a huge blow to my ego. I come from being like an expert, 27 years with 2 master's degrees in one field, and now I'm in football. What am I doing here? And just trying to understand that business. But so it was a tough transition, but it was a worthy transition. And now that I've been here almost 5 years. I have more than increased my staff and the number of units that I'm responsible for fourfold. So I took over cybersecurity. I fought for it for a year and a half, and I got it about a year and a half ago. So I've had it, actually coming up on 2 years. So cybersecurity is now part of the security department. I didn't know anything about cybersecurity when I started this fight, but I knew enough to know that it needed to be with us. It needed to be part of the security picture. So I learned it. And now I have cybersecurity, and it's it occupies probably 70% of my security role. So you can do it. It just doesn't matter how much effort you want to put into it.
Great questions. Our next question comes from Marissa, who emailed us her question actually a few days ago. So she was on top of it. So Marissa,
Okay, can you hear me? I was kind of cutting it out. Okay, my name is Marissa. I'm a civilian supervisor with LAPD's Dispatch Center. And for the past 6 years, I'm also the security supervisor for dispatchers at the Dodger Security Command Post. So my question to you is, do you think that there's value in standardizing command post operations at large sports venues with dispatch cadre that could handle all radio traffic with security, all levels of security with standardized procedures, terminology, and just everyday operations in the command post?
First of all, that sounds to me like something you ought to be doing for a thesis for the Naval Postgraduate School, because they could benefit from that. And those theses get a lot of reviews from a lot of people in the field. Yes, I do. I think it's a great thought. I had not thought about that, but I have to tell you, just during this Super Bowl, so one of the things I've introduced in our Super Bowls now is I bring in our own unified kind of command, and we bring dispatchers. I actually have dispatch that help me run the security operation, not just my operation, but with all of our security vendors and others. And the dispatch role is so critical, and having standards that are consistent across the board would be amazing. So I think it's a great, would add great value.
Okay, and one more thing, I would love to reach out if we can and talk offline, because it's something that I think we would benefit for, and it's something that we've implemented at Dodgers. It's definitely a 100% unified command and something that's kind of carrying over to the Coliseum. And I would like to see that maybe spread throughout the NFL and the MLB. So I'm really looking forward to working with partners that are interested.
That's great. I happen to have connections at the other Major League Sports because I'm the co-chair of the sports subsector committee. So I'm happy to help connect you with others as well.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Making it happen here. Julie Quinn, you are next. Please go ahead and ask your question of Chief Lanier.
Hello, Chief. I'm so excited to talk to you. I'm a huge NFL fan. I'm sitting here in my Dodger sweatshirt. Otherwise, I would go on camera. I co-own Quinn Williams, which is a security and emergency management women-owned business here in LA. My partner, Catherine, is on the board of Women in Homeland Security. So again, just thank you to all the women. Thank you to you, Chief. My question is about the Super Bowl. It's coming to LA. Couldn't be more excited about that. And I get questions as a consultant about what can the city expect when it's hosting the event. And we did a lot of research, and I know there's usually the 10-day, 2-week kind of hoopla. I'm sure COVID has changed that. Who knows where we'll be, come next year. I was just wondering if you could sort of share thoughts on what the city can look forward to, and maybe what the public safety community can look forward to sort of when the event gets here.
Wow, I tell you, it is a lot. It is really, really a lot. I think the fortunate thing is that LA has, the capacity that some places we go. I mean, I think back when we did a draft in Nashville 2 years ago. Nashville's a pretty small community and a pretty small public safety footprint. And we brought 600,000 people in for the draft. I mean, it was a real challenge and they also had, marathons and everything else going on in the city at the same time. I think LA, the good thing is you've got a large, capable, well-trained footprint, but it is really overwhelming. It's not just the Super Bowl events. First of all, we at the NFL ask a lot of the city. I mean, these cities bid for these Super Bowls. So they put in a bid, and in the bid, we ask that they provide all of these things. And I think that the host cities don't realize just how significant a resource that ultimately ends up to be, because you don't know how big Super Bowl is until you see Super Bowl. But I will tell you, I think it's not just the official events. Everybody who's anybody in terms, especially in LA, I'm sure, but I don't care where we are. Any entertainer who's anybody is going to show up. And if they're not part of the official venues, they're going to be huge warehouse concerts and all kinds of other events that are going on that just start sucking all of your resources away. And so now you're trying to hold your commitment to the host as the host city, to the bid with the NFL, all the things that you've committed to do with us. But now you've got all these other events going on. I mean, just look at the after parties in Tampa, right? If you saw some of that footage, what a strain that was on Hillsborough County and Tampa, given the fact that we had so many other resources tied up. It's a huge lift. So be prepared, and, happy to help. We're meeting with public safety officials now. So it's a big lift.
a great question. I know all of us here in Los Angeles are looking forward and can't wait how that's going to change.
It's chaos like you've never seen.
We have to start prepping ourselves now mentally.
But I mean, literally the crowds, seriously, and if we're out of this COVID, like we all hope we are, the crowds are so overwhelming that the streets just get blocked and you're not driving anywhere. I mean, it's really overwhelming. You'll see, I'm sure.
Thank you for that question, Julie. Our next question comes from Andrea Capshaw. Please go ahead, Andrea.
Hi, I'm Andrea. I am currently one of the senior specialists at the Walt Disney Company Global Security Communications Center. And my question to you is, what's been the biggest challenge you faced while working with the NFL, and how did you overcome these challenges, both pre and post-COVID?
I think the biggest challenge is, I think I alluded to a little bit earlier, is really forcing myself to learn the business. It's relevant. It's extremely relevant when you're in security. It's just as relevant as when I was the chief of police, that I understood how public health worked, and then I understood how public works worked. They were all critical, integral partners of mine. And so I think it's just as critical when you're in private security to know how the business works and how revenue is generated and what, all those dynamics, how sponsorship works. So that was a big challenge for me, because I like security. I want to focus on my security, right? This is what I'm good at. Don't bother me with all this other stuff. But it's not that way. You can't be that way. You've got to know all that stuff, because you can only make security effective if you do understand all that stuff. How you overcome those things is you got to push yourself and you've got to ask for help. I mean, that is the things that, when I talk about getting over that lack of confidence, you've got to be confident in yourself enough to go to somebody and say, look, I really don't understand this. Can you help me? So that I can, and here's why I want to understand, so I can make, do my job better and provide better security. So, I think that's, hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. That was great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Very helpful.
Thank you. We have some great questions coming in, so we're going to try to get to all of them as we are coming up on the hour. Gina Marie, will you please go next?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chief Lanier, for speaking with us today. I found your personal story really fascinating, and I just wanted to ask, basically, you started out kind of in the police force in more of an operational role, and you gradually added to your academic credentials in security and emergency management. But what would you have, advice would you have for people who came into this field maybe the opposite way, especially those kind of just starting out? So coming from academia, but really want to expand their horizons and operational expertise.
Oh, you don't know how bad us operational people need you academic people. That's the start of it. I'm telling you, when in the police department, I was always a tactical, hands-on person. And the thing that I surrounded myself with, and once I became the chief, I made it a huge part, significantly expanded our civilian population in the police department. And I brought in a lot of academics into the setting, because we operational people really need that. And so I think there's a real value add for somebody who's in the academic side that wants to move over and understand better the operational side. A quick example, we had detectives that were out running around trying to solve all of these, when the cell phone robbery, phenomenon began, and everybody was stealing people's cell phones and, injuring people in these robberies just to get these cell phones so they could resell them on the black market. Responding to so many calls and then using all these technologies and trying to track these cases was so overwhelming for detectives. I brought in a bunch of college students. We created a new position, investigative support positions, and they added. At first, the detectives said, "We don't know. These civilians can't help us. We don't need them. These are kind of nerdy, techie kids. We don't need them." And so all I had those kids doing initially is here, we set them in the command center. We have all of these CCTV, we have the shot spotter, we've got, all these different technologies, GPS, when we have a shots fired call, we have a homicide, or we have a carjacking, can you guys just start trying to connect the dots with all of these different technologies and provide something out to the detectives in the field? And within 6 months, they had become so valuable. We started with 4. We went up to, after 6 months, we went up to 16, and you could not pry them away from those detectives. So I say that to say there's always opportunities to add value. Operational people need some support from people who make them think a different way and show them a different way to do things. And I think it's an exciting challenge for you as well.
It's a great question. I can completely relate to that as well, coming from academia. We're going to try to squeeze in one more question coming from Marla Noel. It's a great way to round out this conversation. Marla, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Cathy, so much for speaking to us. My name's Marla Noel. I'm with OC Growth Advisors, and I'm in Southern California. So got like 3 extra bedrooms if you need one while you're here. So I am wondering if you have any women mentors in your life that really helped you besides your mother. You know, is there anybody that reached out to you that helped you?
There really are. And I tell you, women are amazing. The first and most dramatic experience I can tell you is when Mayor Fenty nominated me to be the chief of police. I was a white female in a city that's predominantly African-American and a police department that's predominantly African-American and predominantly male. I was 39 years old, which is unheard of for a chief of police. And this is the nation's capital. And women came out of the woodwork to try and help me. There's a group of women, it's an international women's network, that on the day of my confirmation hearing, I walked in to my confirmation hearing, and this tall, thin African-American woman who I'd never met before walked up to me and said, "Are you Chief Lanier?" And I said, "Well, I will be if this confirmation hearing goes well." And she says, "Well, I'm here from the International Women's Network," and she pointed to 4 other women. She says, "And we're here to make sure that nobody asks you any questions that are inappropriate and that you get a fair shake of this hearing." And they had traveled from all over. And I thought, oh my God, this is incredible to see women supporting other women that way. And from that moment on, I've made it a point for me to try and be available and support women as much as I can, the way that felt to hear that statement. And so I did have women, Heather Isavor, who's runs the Naval Postgraduate School. She's a constant friend, but is also a mentor. I've had lots of women that want to help push, help other women and push you going forward, but many, many, many over my career. Obviously, mostly men, because I was in a male-dominated career before this, but I did have women that just really went out of their way to help me, and I wouldn't have been here without them.
So I'm hoping I can encourage you to speak for WPO Women's President's Organization.
Sure, anything for women.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Great way to round out the conversation. Chief Lanier, truly indebted for you and for spending some time with us. This was the highlight of my 2021, and I'm sure that it's going to be definitely difficult to beat. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, and great to meet all of you, and best of luck to all of you. My contact information, by the way, you certainly can share it, but I give my cell phone number to everybody. First of all, my email is Cathy.Lanier@NFL.com. So pretty easy. Just spell my name with a C, Cathy.Lanier@NFL.com. You can get me by email, and my cell number is 202-359-8606. If I can help anybody with anything, please don't hesitate to give me a call.
Thank you so much, Chief Lanier. True inspiration. So as we end, I just want to remind all of you quickly, we have our next event coming up March 26th. It's going to be Black Swans and Gray Rhinos, Lessons for Risk Management in the Age of COVID-19. It's going to be facilitated by Dr. Shruti Tapkadar from the San Mateo Health Department. We hope you enjoyed today. Please be on the lookout for a eval form. We want to know how you enjoyed today, whether you enjoyed the meals. Stay well, everyone, and we will see you next month. And again, Chief Lanier, truly inspirational. Thank you so much.
Yeah.